Hello everyone! One of the central topics of the section Basic Concepts of Classical VA, Block 1 of the training course Cost Engineering is the information providing of value analysis. The basic array of initial data for the analysis is formed within the framework of the activities of the main or permanent composition of working group. In more detail, the concept of working group and the classification of its participants we will discuss in the video of Block 3, Arrangement of Value Analysis, Working Group, Concept and Competences. The main composition of working group, as a rule, can include a representative of design departments, a cost engineer of the first, second or third types, and a buyer. Additional initial data, the need the formation of which may be due to the specifics of value analysis, can be performed with the involvement of session or temporary members of the working group, technologists, project managers, marketing specialists, representatives of production sites, and etc. The issues of the activities of session, temporary members of the working group in the field of information providing of value analysis will be discussed in more detail in video of Block 1 of the series Information Providing of Value Analysis. As part of the discussion of today's topic, the following keywords will be used. I recommend the viewers of our channel to familiarize themselves with these keywords before watching this video. Looking ahead, I will say that most of the concepts that will be given in the slide categories of standard initial data and the column name of value analysis initial data will be considered by us separately in more detail in videos of the same name in blocks 1, 2, 3 of this course. With regard to the concept of primary documentation, listeners can draw an analogy. Primary accounting documentation, i.e., we are talking about official certified documents confirming a fact, for example, the fact of the current value of product component is a certain time interval cost. However, in cost engineering, the concept of primary documentation still differs from accounting in terms of composition of documents, which will be seen from the slide categories of standard initial data included in this video. The concept of functional basis directly refers to the list of source data and will be separately introduced and discussed in section 1 of block 1 in the video entitled Functional Model, Functional Basis. As part of the section of the university lecture course devoted to the information providing of value analysis, the following aspects are usually considered. Regarding the definition of the concept of information providing of value analysis, in our course we will not conceptually deviate from the classical definition, which can be formulated as follows. Value analysis information providing includes a set of works on the formation and systematization of initial data in accordance with the concept of the value analysis database used. We should immediately note that the section devoted to databases for storing value analysis information mentioned in the above definition of the concept of value analysis information providing is usually absent in the university course. In practice, the situation is usually as follows. In the case of insignificant amount of work in the value analysis, the files are systematized without any formal rules, i.e., at the discretion of the specialist who collect data, processes and analyzes it. In fact, a directory is created on the server, for example, a folder with name of value analysis containing subdirectories, for example, folders with the names quotations, CBD, calculations, report files, etc. The obvious disadvantage of such a data storage system is that the only can understand it as a rule who created, since there are no instructions on how to use this data storage system and decrypt the destinations, names of folders, files, etc. The described data storage system within the framework of the course Cost Engineering has a destination, Simplified Value Analysis Database, A system that takes into account the possibility of more organized and storage of a significant amount of data with organized access to them using the functionality of ERP or PDM system has the designation complex value analysis database. Both data storage system in the context of various course blocks from 2 to 6 will be discussed in more detail in the video Value Analysis Database section 1 of block 1. The concept of dividing the value analysis information providing into integrated and local constituents, which usually takes place when considering the university course of value analysis, is not implemented in the course cost engineering, because in practice it's quite difficult to distinguish between these two constituents. The pure integrated constituents rarely takes place, since it's more the area of activity of IT specialists and technician and economic specialists engaged in supporting the functioning of PDM and ERP model. At the same time, experience shows with local analysis, i.e. when analyze specific components of a product, you periodically have to turn the integrated component, i.e. download data from ERP and PDM models, and etc. The slides categories of standard initial data and basic, which will be discussed in the issue, take into account both constituents of the information support of value analysis, as well as a list of regulatory and reference documentation that can be used in the process of generating initial data. In some university value analysis lecture courses, this definition may list the stages of work on the formation of initial data, as well as methods for collecting information, for example, methods for determining significance, however, in accordance with the concept of presentation used in the course cost engineering. The details of a number of works and methods for the formation of initial data will be considered in separate issues. The stage of value analysis, which we consider in this video and call the stage of the formation of initial data in the reference books of the Value Analysis Domestic Scientific School, is often called the information stage. Those interested can get acquainted with the domestic value analysis reference books presented on the slide. Such a discrepancy in the terminology has reasons related to the fact that the practical activity of the author of the course cost engineering such a term information stage did not take root due to the volume of its description and the corresponding difficulties in the perception of its content by the majority of related practitioners involved in the formation of initial data. In addition, in most cases, it's impossible to conduct long-term training of participants in the process of forming initial data, the methodology of conducting the information stage, in its classical presentation. The way out of this situation was the decomposition of the applied methodology for generating value analysis initial data into blocks, which, by the way, fully correspond to the structure of the educational course cost engineering, with the exception of blocks 1 and 7. Thus, a special training documents methodology was formed for each of the participants in the process, according to which he could from the part of the initial data for which he is responsible, i.e. designer, engineer formed the design data, the buyer, the purchasing data, the marketer, the data for the formation of the target price, etc. The role of coordinator, curator of this process, in this case, is played by a cost engineer of first, second or third types. When considering the DIN standards describing the process of conducting the value analysis, one of the stages of which is the preparation of initial data, we see the differences between the methodology of conducting the value analysis abroad from the methodology adopted in domestic school of value analysis, which consists in fact that the formation of initial data is referred to the analytical stage, due to the fact that the separate there is no concept of an information stage when planning a value analysis in a foreign school. Otherwise, the approach to the formation of the initial data is mostly similar. Depending on the degree of detail of the value analysis that we want to implement, the formation of initial data can be quite a time-consuming task, the implementation of which requires different levels of training of performers of work on the formation of initial data. Accordingly, depending on whether the company is a developer of the product, developer of the analyzed component of the product, two cases are possible. The case of analyzing a self-developed component of a product, the case of the analysis of the purchased component of a product. To consider these two cases, we introduce the concept of customer of initial data and a contractor of the work on the formation of initial data. We do not specify for what purposes the initial data is indeed, since they can be used in the work of designers, buyers, marketers, management accounting systems, etc., i.e. in all areas where the value analysis can be applied, and the list of these areas is significant. Some of them will be considered by us in Section 2, Block 1 of the training course. So, for both Case 1 and Case 2, source data customer is developed, analyzed of product component and R&D stage. The direct customer of work on the preparation of initial data is in this case, as a rule, cost engineers of first, second and third levels who are part of the working group on reducing the cost of components of the designed product. With regard to the concept of contractor for the formation of initial data, the situation will be somewhat more complicated, since for Case 1 the contractor will be internal, i.e. the initial data is formed by specialists within the company of the product developer, and for Case 2 external, i.e. the initial data is formed by the specialist or the supplier of component or the purchased product. Sometimes, under the terms of the contract, the developer of the purchased product can also transfer exclusive rights to the design documentation to the customer, but in most cases this information is related to know-how. And in addition, the purchased product only dimensional and installation drawings or 3D layouts or 3D models, as well as technical specifications for component. The direct contractors of the work on the formation of the initial data, as already mentioned above, can be conditionally divided into a curator, whose role as a rule is played by a cost engineer or a buyer and other specialists of various profiles. The general case of the list of specialists involved in the formation of the initial data will be discussed in this video later, on the slide RACIC. The cost engineer receives most of the information by requesting it from highly specialized specialists, although in some cases the cost engineer can obtain a significant part of the required information independently from an ERP or PDM system. Nevertheless, it's highly undesirable to form such elements of initial data as a structural and functional model in isolation from the designers. And it's desirable to verify economic data with an economist of the production site after unloading them from the ERP system before proceeding with the value analysis. The use of the concept of initial data customer and initial data contractor is typical both for cases of a significant amount of required source or initial data, one analyzed component, and for cases of time-consuming analytical work, for example, when forming an action plan to reduce the cost of several product components. With a slight labor intensity, the initial data can be generated in working order. However, in most cases, an additional contract is drawn up between the customer and the contractor of these specific works, indicating the labor intensity and the hour rate. The type of work to which these works will be attributed and taken into account in the accounting departments depends on the working in contract, R&D, consulting services, etc., as well the factors such as the company's accounting policy, accounting standards, use, etc. In addition, this issue is not a direct subject of consideration our video, so we will not delve into it, noting only possible options for the formulation of the name of the work performed of the formation of initial data. The practical meaning of specifying these formulation options in our video is that the proposed options are used in the contract. In most cases, they can be taken into account by the company that is the customer of the initial data. On the slide Categories of Typical Initial Data, we will introduce the concept of primary initial data, derived initial data of the first and second levels. The issue of the formation of the composition shown on the slide, as well as distribution of responsibilities in the working group, will be considered separately by us in videos of Block 3 under the title Organization of Value Analysis Working Group. Primary initial data. The composition of the primary initial data as a first approximation may be limited to the list of primary documentation, which we have already mentioned above in this issue in the section Keywords, as well as other documents listed in the column Name of Standard Initial Data in Value Analysis. The formation of documents that make up the primary initial data occurs regardless of whether the value analysis will be conducted, i.e. the work of the direct contractor of the formation a set of primary initial data, is the formation of a data based on the request of members of the working group to reduce the cost of a product, search and acquisition of these documents. This is the reason for requirements for the qualification of the performer indicated in the table. In practice, the contractor may be a cost engineer both on the part of the buyer and the part of the supplier, a representative of supplier's sales department, or a representative of the customer's buyers. Derived initial data of first level. The composition of first-level derived initial data, in contrast to the primary initial data, is more heterogeneous in the sense that it can be presented existing documents regardless of whether the value analysis will be conducted. Supplier evaluation card or competition sheet, reports on the assessments of customer operator satisfaction, etc. So are the documents generated directly for the purposes of the value analysis, like a functional basis, expert calculation in the form of the customer, etc. The work of the direct contractor of the formation set of derived initial data of the first level, as a rule, is the formation of a list of necessary primary initial data based on the request of members of working group to reduce the cost of the product, the search and acquisition of the necessary primary initial data and filling in the standard forms, i.e. the direct formation of derived initial data of the first level. Thus, the requirements for the qualification of the performer become higher. In practice, the contractor is a cost engineer of the part of the buyer or on the part of the supplier who, in the process of generation initial data, turns the designers, buyers and other specialists. Derived initial data of second level. The composition of the derived initial data of the second level, unlike the first two types of initial data, consists entirely of specialized documents related to the conduct of the value analysis. The peculiarity of this type of initial data is the highest possible requirements for the direct contractor of the work on the formation of the initial data and the impossibility of their formation without prior training. The direct contractor of the work in most cases is a cost engineer. One of the ways out of the situation when it's impossible to conduct training in this departure of a specialist who has the skills to form derived initial data of the second level to the supplier and the formation of initial data on the spot, with the involvement of designers, cost engineers, buyers and other necessary specialists from the supplier or company developer. In the table presented on the slide, the distribution of responsibilities for various analytical tasks is identical, but in practice It may be different since it directly depends on the business process operating in the company that describes the performance of a specific analytical tasks. For example, in company A, in accordance with the business process of forming the target price, the actual shop calculation should be provided to cost engineers who are part of the working group for conducting the value analysis on the part of the buyer, i.e. the buyer sends a request for calculations to the supplier. In company B, in turn, in accordance with the business process, cost engineers can directly apply for calculations to the supplier, and accordingly they themselves are responsible for requesting calculations and generating initial data for value analysis based on them. A similar situation may be with the design documentation, i.e. if the developer company has its own design department, then the responsibility for providing the design documentation lies with it. If there is no such department, then cost engineers or buyers can be appointed responsible for providing design documentation for the formation of the initial data for value analysis, who themselves will request design documentation from the supplier. Within the framework of this issue, we will not delve into the description of the methodology for forming business processes of working groups to reduce the production cost of a product, since Block 7 of our course is devoted to this topic. The only concept from the field of business processes that I would like to mention in passing this issue is the concept of the responsibility allocation table, or RACIC. Listeners who have taken the trouble to understand the etymology of the keywords of this issue know that the term RACIC is an abbreviation of words responsible, accountable, supportive, informed and consulted, i.e. it implies that the presence of such a table solves not only the issue of the distribution of responsibility, but also the issues of the distribution of roles in according information support, informing about the current status and consulting. The reason for mentioning the concept of RACIC, I believe, is already obvious to many listeners at the moment. Indeed, RACIC at the above table of distribution of responsibility for the formation of initial data between the members of the working group have a lot in common if instead of the concept of analytical tasks. In our table, we substitute the concept of process. However, there is also a significant difference, the presence of a specific names of initial data in our table, so RACIC is a more general or abstract tool. Personally, an analogy comes to my mind in the degree of abstraction from the field of project implementation, named as a roadmap or action plan. I have given this comparison only to understand the differences in the degree of abstraction of consideration. In fact, there is no connection between the table of distribution of responsibility for the formation of initial data between the members of the working group and the implementation of the project management. Unless, of course, we are considering the application of the value analysis in the field of project management implementation. This direction will be considered by us in Block 6. At the end of the video, I would like to note the significant complexity of the initial data generation stage. Practice shows that the time spent on the formation of initial data can be from 50 to 80% of total time of analytical work, starting from the moment of selecting the object of analysis. This feature should be taken into account in the process of planning analytical work, the issues of organization and planning, cost accounting, and evaluation of the effectiveness of analytical work considered separately in the general form in the reference and regulatory documentation mentioned above. Therefore, in order to avoid duplication in the course, cost engineering, the organization and planning of analytical work will be considered at a lower level, named separately from specialized departments of the organizational structure corresponding in block from 2 to 6 of the course. In the videos titled Organization of the analytical process, planning, cost of implementation, efficiency. I suggest we end this for today. Put likes, subscribe, all bye.